Hey everyone, what's up? It's Uri for Guerrilla Poker. I'm going to be making a video that's pretty different than my usual ones today. No solvers involved. We're going to go through hands where I face tough river decisions. I'll walk you guys through what goes through my head before I invariably decide to station the river. Hope you guys enjoy the video. So first hand, I have pocket tens on the cutoff. Open. Get 3-bet. You guys can see this is a bit of a big sizing for a 3-bet. It's even bigger than 5x. This is something that you'll see more and more as you go to higher stakes games. It's a good sizing to take for multiple reasons. So tens I'm gonna call, jack 6-3 two-tone, third pot bet, call, check. Here tens on the turn, I'm gonna mostly check behind. You could make some small bet for protection to get some folds from ace king, ace queen type hands. But if you start making those small bets too often, the other player can adjust to that by starting to check strong hands and check raise you, which is really bad for you. So get a queen river and all in. I always try to think about which hands make sense for value and which hands make sense as a bluff, and what properties my hand kind of has as a bluff catcher. And here, looking at this situation, I think something like kings or aces would make sense for value. I feel like personally, if someone ever gets here with queen jack or pocket queens or pocket jacks, even king 10 or 10-8 somehow, those hands would be a lot more likely to take a different type of line, such as bet small or check raise or something like that. Queen jack blocking the top two cards is not likely to open shove. So I feel like it really needs to be kings and aces a lot. As far as bluffs, I think anything with a 10, like something like ace 10, would make sense. Usually when you bluff really big, you're looking for cards that mimic the nut hands. That's often the trigger psychologically to bluff really big. So I think anything with a king or a 10, so something like ace king, ace 10, both of those hands could play this way and bluff. Then when you look at my hand, pocket tens, I block king 10 and 10-8, but those hands would probably not 3-bet super often and then probably barrel turn a lot. So it's kind of a whatever spot. You need to think about the player and dynamics a bit. I think it's an okay spot to call, but nothing special. Ace king this time from villain, which I think is fine at some frequency. So next hand, open kings from the button, get really big 3-bet again, 4-bet, get called. Get the nightmare ace high board that you always get when you 4-bet kings. At least I always get this one. I decide to c-bet really small. Why do I go this small? A really small bet is about protecting your equity, and kings has such a lockdown on this board. You don't really need to go a lot bigger than this to get hands to fold. Nothing can outdraw you as far as a pair. There's no flush draw on the board. There is no real straight draw considering he 3-bet and called a 4-bet, so bet really small. Check back the turn, face a river shove. Again, you need to think about what kind of hands could the other guy be bluffing with and what kind of hands could he be value betting with. So value betting, I feel like, ace queen plus probably more or less, sets in 2 pairs if he has those. But again, there's something about sets in 2 pairs that often makes them take different lines. So if you have something like ace 10, there's a decent chance you're a bit motivated to be more tricky and bet smaller, check again. Just a gut feeling I have about how people play. So what could the guy be bluffing with? 10 on the surface hits a lot of the draws. I think he'd have to be either turning like a 7-8 suited, 9-8 suited, jack 10 suited type of hand into a bluff, or he'd have to have floated me with like a king jack, king queen, queen jack suited with a backdoor and turned those into a bluff. I think both are reasonable if you think about it. If villain has a 7 or a 9 here, those have pretty much zero chance of winning a showdown by going check because when it goes I bet small and then check down, I'm gonna have kings, queens or jacks every single time. So those are reasonable, and I think that there is certainly enough bluffs. Kings is kind of a nice hand to call with, and there's even the fact that this king is a club, which makes it a bit nicer, in that it blocks less of the backdoor floats. So I decide to call, and we see Queen Jack of Spades, which is probably a bit too loose of a float, but I think not a surprising one given how small I bet. And here the small bet sizing really makes the river bluff catch a bit easier, because had I bet like a third pot on the flop, these hands wouldn't be there. And then you're more counting on the pairs turned into bluffs. Okay, so open sixes, get the big 3-bet again, which, like I said, this is a real thing. 9-8-3 two-tone, again third pot bet, always calling for, mostly checking back, similar to the tens hand. You can stab for protection, but you can't do it every time, or you risk opening yourself up to the other guy just going check raise crazy on you. 7 of clubs river, and boom, huge overbet. First instinct when you look at sixes, I think similar to tens, would be, oh wow, look at my blockers, I block all the nut hands. These are the kind of hands people love calling with, but does this hand really block the way you think it does? So sixes, first thing, it blocks it straight, it blocks 6-5 suited, but does it really? Like he 3-bet from the small blind, 6-5 suited is not really in that range much. And then, if he had 6-5 suited, he'd probably barrel a turn. He has an open-ended straight draw. So 6 is not really super relevant. Then you have the 6 of clubs. You're like, wow, I block flushes. But which club flush draws have the 6 of clubs? 8-6 of clubs doesn't get 3-bet. 5-6 of clubs, like we were mentioning, might have bet the turn, but sure, maybe you block that combo that rarely 3-bets and often bets, you block that one. And then A6 of clubs, which also often bets the turn. So the blockers, while they seem amazing, they're okay, but they're nothing too special. On the other hand, when we think about his range on this board, and especially if you look at the stack size, I think because I could easily have like a set of 7s or 2-pair 8-7 suited, I could have clubs, I could have 5-6 or Jack 10 myself in position. He can't really do this with a lot of hands. This sizing doesn't make sense for many value hands. If he somehow has a flush, very likely he'd go small bet and hope to get raised. And if he gets raised, can even shove over the top. Like the sizing just doesn't really fit well. Definitely can't do this with 2-pair. I don't know if he can do this with a set, but it's a weird size to take for this spot. And I think it's more of a try to scare me size, because I'm often going to have a hand like ace high or 1-pair, and those are going to be tough to call with. So I decide to call, and we see ace 10 of hearts, which, like I was saying, people who make these huge bets often look to have a card blocking the nuts in some way. But here, he could have had like ace king, ace queen, ace jack offsuit with a club. Like there are a million hands like this he could have bluffed with. And seeing this one makes me feel pretty good about calling sixes. So, last hand. This one's a bit shorter stacked and higher stakes. I'm gonna open the cutoff with king 10 of diamonds. Big blind call. C-bet. Here I barrel the turn, which I'm gonna do sometimes with this hand. It's a really strong hand on this board at this SPR, where I could probably win very, very often if I hit a king or a 10 in addition to the gut shot. Get called, river king, and how is this a bluff catching decision? Well, the guy goes all in. This time, unlike the others, I actually don't have really good blockers. I'm obviously bluff catching. I don't think he'd do this with worse for value. So what I need to figure out is how many flushes are actually in his range, and which hands could he potentially bluff with. So how many flushes? I think that this is part of the thought process for me, is that when you're 20 big blinds deep, people super often just fast play flush draws. They're not interested in, like, there's no implied odds or anything. They just go for the immediate fold equity. So I think there's a fairly reasonable chance most flush draws would have gotten raised on the flop or the turn. And that's a lot of what's leaning me towards a call here. As far as what to bluff with, it's kind of tricky, because this guy would have had to call the turn and then turn his hand into a bluff on the river. So what kind of hand is that going to be? I think 10-8 suited maybe would call turn and do this, but I'm not sure 10-8 suited could even call the turn. I feel like personally it's turning a pair into a bluff, and always have to ask yourself, is my opponent capable of turning a pair into a bluff? And as you go lower down in stakes, the answer is definitely not, and then in these kind of spots there are just zero bluffs for people and you just always fold everything. As you go higher in stakes, people have this tendency to like turning a pair into a bluff. It's a cool move, it's a creative move, and it's something people don't expect. So a lot of high stakes players actually overdo this. So call, see ace-9, and I think this hand, as played by a villain, is, I wouldn't know if he's bluffing too wide or not. I don't know his thought process, but I think it's a really cool bluff, and there's probably a decent chance that a lot of people would fold way too much when he does this, like just not look to bluff catch at all, which would make this an amazing play. Overall on the river, very often when you face big bets, you're not gonna have hands that are like snap calls or very comfortable calls. You're often gonna have these kind of awkward hands, and I know personally the first few times I faced these big bets, I would just kind of fold and wait for next time and fold and wait for next time. That's something you definitely need to be careful doing, especially as you move up higher in stakes and people get more capable of abusing you in these spots. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.